What's up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video, we are going to be discussing the disappearance of Keeshae Jacobs, and there's actually not a whole lot of information on her disappearance in particular. It's a very small set of circumstances with not a lot of physical evidence or anything really left behind to give us a solid ground to stand on when it comes to creating theories and ideas of what exactly happened and where she might be. But the reason that I really wanted to get this story out there is that this family has gone through so much. It's been so much more than just the disappearance of Keeshae. There has been so much tragedy, and Toni, Keeshae's mother, has just done incredible things despite that. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the video. Keeshae was only 21 years old when she went missing from Richmond, Virginia on September 26, 2016. Now, Keeshae was an incredible, driven, and hardworking young woman. Her mom, Toni, as I said, is also an incredible person. She actually served in the Army and was in Operation Desert Storm at the age of 18. So needless to say, Keeshae was raised by a pretty tough and awesome woman. So Keeshae grew up in Richmond her whole entire life. She lived with her mother and her older brother, Davon. Her mom was a single mom. I don't know if it was her whole life, but they were all very, very close, likely because of this. It was always a situation where they all worked together to be happy and to be successful and to support each other and push each other. It was just a really, really positive environment. And Keeshae herself was in particular very, very close to her mom. She loved her mom so much. Even when she was little, her mom was her cheerleading coach in elementary school. This was someone that she constantly confided in when she grew up into a teenager. She even talked to her mom about a lot of teenage things. They just had a very open, honest relationship with each other. And even after high school, she decided that she still wanted to live with her mom. Now, Keeshae wasn't quite sure what career path she wanted to go to, just what life path in general. She wasn't necessarily in a huge rush. She didn't want to jump into something that she wasn't really passionate about. So she decided she was going to live with her mom and she was going to work really, really hard while she was figuring out what she wanted to do in order to save money. And she was a very, very hardworking and successful worker. She worked many different jobs around the Richmond area, and she wasn't quite like a lot of people her age. She wasn't into going out and partying and drinking a lot or clubbing. Not saying she never did, it just wasn't necessarily her scene. She did hang out with her friends a lot. She loved her friends. She was a really dedicated friend, but she was a homebody. She wanted to be at home. She wanted to be working hard. She wanted to be with her family and working towards her future. So the setup that she had going was pretty much perfect for her. So now on to the last time anyone saw Keeshae. On the 26th of September 2016, Toni, Keeshae's mom, had been at school majority of the day, and she came home later that night to find Keeshae visibly pretty upset. She was sitting there with her brother, Davon, and they all started to have a conversation and found out that she had been in a pretty bad argument with her boyfriend at the time. Now, I guess she had broken up with him or something had happened, and she was really, really upset. So they all kind of talked about it as a family. They were trying to encourage her and tell her it would be all right and like she could get through this and all these different things. After she calmed down a little bit, she decided that she was going to go and stay at a friend's house that night. Her mom offered to give her a ride, but she ended up denying it, saying that she had already contacted her friend was on the way to pick her up, and she packed a small bag of clothes, grabbed her ID, her mom made sure she grabbed her phone charger, and she was out the door. And this was at around 11 p.m. on the 26th. Now, Toni never asked Keeshae who exactly she was staying with, what house she was going to be at. Keeshae was 21 years old. She was an adult. She pretty much made her own decisions, and Tony didn't want to pry, so that was that. Tony always made sure to tell Keeshae to keep her phone charged, and she always made sure Keeshae contacted her whenever she arrived at her destination. So Tony ended up texting her later that night saying, I'm going to bed, just want to make sure you're safe, make sure you're okay, keep your phone charged, I'll talk to you tomorrow. The following day of the 27th, Tony had to wake up decently early to go work her job as a dispatcher, and she hadn't necessarily expected to see Keeshae at home that morning. No one really goes to a sleepover, wakes up at the crack of dawn, and comes back home, but she was expecting to get a phone call from Keeshae to let her know she had eventually arrived home safely. Tony and Keeshae already typically had a phone call on Tony's lunch break, which was anywhere between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m., so it would have been a typical conversation they would have had daily anyways. Tony sat and waited for the call, but it never came in, and this was out of character completely for Keeshae because she always kept in contact with her mom. If her phone was going to die and she was out with friends, she always texted her mom a phone number of someone she was with so she could get in contact with her. This just wasn't making sense, and even if her phone had died, Tony knew that Keeshae had taken her charger. Tony decided to call Keeshae herself instead of sitting around waiting for the phone call, and Keeshae's phone went straight to voicemail. Again, Tony didn't really want to panic. We don't all jump to conclusions that something's wrong just from someone's phone going to voicemail, so she decided to call Devon, who was living at their home at the time, and asked if he had seen her. But Devon said he hadn't spoken to Keeshae or seen Keeshae since the night before when they were all sitting together talking about her argument with her boyfriend. So it's important to note here that Devon had only been home for about 2 months. He had been in prison for about a year for a drug-related charge, and he had basically just gotten home. And because they were such a close-knit family, Keeshae was excited for him to be home. She constantly maintained contact with him. They were all living in the same house. If she had come home at any point, he would have known about it. And it wasn't until later that night when she got home from work, realizing Keeshae still wasn't home, that she began to realize something actually might have happened to her daughter. But unfortunately, Keeshae had been with friends, and again, Tony didn't know what friends exactly she was with. So she started to go down the list of Keeshae's friends, calling them, asking them if they had absolutely any idea where she was. A lot of people said they hadn't seen her, but there was one group of friends, some of her closest friends, they said that they had seen Keeshae the night before, but that she left after being with them for a while, and they had no idea where she ended up at the end of the night for this sleepover. Next day, the 28th, Tony at this point decided to physically go check door to door at all the friends' house that she knew of, people in the neighborhood, but there were absolutely no hints as to where Keeshae was, and she finally decided to report her as missing. Obviously, we know it is very, very difficult to have an adult reported missing and then have it taken seriously, especially for some reason this age range. This is that awkward time where you're no longer a minor and now you're an adult, but you still could be living with your parents or could still kind of be under your parents' control somewhat. So a lot of the times authorities roll their eyes every time a parent of a missing person around this age comes in and tries to report them as missing. And this is exactly what ended up happening when Tony initially went into the police station. They said, she might just not want to talk to you. She might just be ignoring your phone calls. And Tony was so desperate because she knew how out of character this was that she started to show the police department her phone. She was like, look at all these records. Look at how many times she calls me in a single day. She has never gone this long without calling me. You can see through my phone records. Something is so wrong. But they really still didn't want to do anything. So authorities sent out a plea to the public just to do something, and other than that, Tony was pretty much on her own. Now, Tony kept making calls, going door to door, hoping maybe she just hadn't reached the right person yet, but an answer actually ended up finding its way to her. The same group of friends that she had initially talked to that claimed they had been with her that night, but they didn't know where she ended up showing up at Tony's front door, and they had something to tell her that did not match up with their initial story. So they said they actually knew that Keeshae had been dropped off at a house in a Churchill neighborhood in the 3100 block of East Broad Street that night. Now, Churchill was about 10 minutes away, so it wasn't very far from where Keeshae lived, but this isn't a place I think she typically went, and I don't think anyone in the group of friends said they knew exactly where Keeshae was going. Keeshae was not specific at all. She just wanted to go to this particular location. Immediately, Tony says, something's wrong here. She got dropped off at this random place. Why did the friends not tell me this initially? So she got the address from them and she went to this house herself and knocked on the door. And a man ended up answering. Now, Tony asked, where's my daughter? Did you see her? She was dropped off here on the 26th. What's going on? And he seemed like he was being very cooperative at first. He told her, yeah, Keeshae was here. She was here, though, at 5 p.m., and Tony is racking her brain thinking there's absolutely no way she was here at 5 p.m. because she was at home. Tony had actually had to go back to the house to pick up some books for school to finish out her last few classes, and that was almost the exact time that she stopped at the house, and Keeshae was the one who brought her books out to her. So this man was lying about the time Keeshae was there. Tony kept on confronting him about this, saying, there's no way this was the time that she was here, and he kept switching up the times. It was almost like he kept pushing the times back by like 30 minutes to an hour, likely hoping he eventually hit a time that Tony couldn't account for. And there was one thing that he did seem adamant about that made Tony very, very concerned. He changed up the time. That part of his story was constantly changing, but the one thing he kept saying was, well, she was only here for a little bit anyways. She showed up, she was here for a few minutes, and then she ended up calling someone for a ride, and she left. At this point, Tony knew something was wrong, and she ended up calling authorities saying, look, you're not working on my daughter's case. She's a missing person. I'm at the house that she was last known to be at, and this guy is changing his story. I need you to get here immediately to question him. Authorities ended up showing up pretty quickly, I think a couple of them, but it still was not the detective that was actually working on the case. They sent just a random detective, and they walked around the house quickly and determined that Keeshae was not there, and there so far was no sign of her. Now, Tony was not at all satisfied with this search. It seems like they just kind of ran in and ran out. So she was again frustrated and left feeling like she had to do everything on her own. But again, somehow through word of mouth, help came to her. The owners of the house heard what was going on, and it's interesting actually how this is kind of connected. Tony ended up finding out that her nephew's wife was actually related to the owners of the house. And the man that was there was just kind of temporarily staying there with his grandmother or great-grandmother, and he was taking care of her. So the owner of the house said, you can go ahead and go in if you want. Like, there's something sketchy with this. Feel free to go in, search whatever you need to search. I don't know if they allowed this because they themselves were concerned about their relatives' involvement or if they just wanted to clear their name. But I think that's awesome that they reached out to Tony to be able to do this because she felt like authorities had not properly searched. So she went to the house and found something that absolutely made her stomach drop. The authorities had gone through the house, but one place that they missed was the basement. And the reason why they probably missed it is because you had to go out back, so completely outside of the house, down a random set of stairs and through some doors to the basement. So it was completely separate from the house. And she thought, what if Keeshae had been here when I was here that day? What if she had just been locked up in the basement and no one thought to search it? When she searched the basement, I don't think she found anything at all out of the ordinary, and through searching the rest of the house, she did not find any of Keeshae's belongings or really any sign of Keeshae, but she did notice there were bloody tissues in one of the trash cans, and she was very, very smart about this, and she was smart when it came to the owners walking her around the house. She said, don't touch anything, don't throw any of that trash away, keep as much of yourself off of a potential crime scene as possible. She went to authorities with this information saying there was a basement that was never checked, that there were bloody tissues in the trash can, and sure enough, authorities finally decided they actually did want to search this house, and they brought in dogs. Now, according to what Tony heard from the owners of the house, they went through this house, and they did it a lot more than once, which typically means they were getting some sort of hits or there was at least something of interest. It's not like they swept the house one time, didn't see anything, and left. They kept going back inside. And Tony said that there was some sort of DNA taken from the home. Now, I have only seen Tony say this. I have not seen any articles that state this. She's not exactly sure what DNA it was. I don't know if they just took the tissues maybe, but she's almost positive that it had to have been something that the dogs picked up belonging to Keeshae, because the authorities obviously ask before situations like this happen for the families to hand over something with that person's DNA on it so the dogs kind of know what to search for. And she had given them articles of Keeshae's, and if there was anything DNA-wise they took from the house, it more than likely was potential DNA evidence that Keeshae was at least there. Other than that, authorities have really kept everything to the vest, and that is purely just speculation based off of what Tony believes from the information that she has gathered. But one really, really alarming thing about authorities searching the house is that they also found out the young man that was living there ran. As soon as Tony confronted him, as soon as the house was being searched, this guy skipped town. And to this day, I don't think Tony has any idea where he is. I don't know if the family knows where he is. He ran because he apparently was on parole for another occurrence with a woman, and that's literally all I know. I don't know his name. They've never released it, which also says a few things. They've never released what exactly he did to a female that put him on parole. But either way, that is not a very great feeling, knowing that the last person your daughter was potentially with ran the second someone showed up asking questions. Authorities continued their search. They searched around the entire perimeter of the home. They also searched a nearby park that I believe was about 2 blocks away, and they didn't find any sign at all of Keeshae. And they had dogs. They did a really, really great search. At this point, authorities were dedicated to the case. Tony also was doing her own investigation still. She ended up going back to the friends that dropped Keeshae off at this random house that night, and she spoke to one of Keeshae's closest friends, DeMarcus. He was in this friend group, and DeMarcus said that he was actually the one that drove Keeshae to this location. But this, to me, is where things again get confusing, and I feel like they're still not giving up information. He said that they were with Keeshae that night, and Keeshae claimed that she was meeting a mutual female friend of theirs at this address. And she asked if someone could drop her off, and DeMarcus said yes, because he was one of her closest friends. He said that he ended up texting the female friend to confirm that Keeshae was meeting with her. And apparently, according to DeMarcus, this female friend confirmed that she was going to be there. Now, there are a few things that sit weird with me about that. They hid dropping Keeshae off at this location for 2 days. They blatantly lied to Tony the first time. If they honestly thought that they were dropping her off to meet with one of their own mutual friends and this mutual friend confirmed it, what would the purpose have been of them hiding it? Something just sits funny. But either way, the authorities ended up bringing in this female friend to ask her, because at this point they're thinking, well, crap, that means there was another female there. She might know where Keeshae went. She might know something about this man that they ended up in the house with. But she apparently completely denied ever texting DeMarcus. Now, I don't know if she fully denied ever being at the house. I just know that she said she never confirmed with DeMarcus that she was going to be meeting at that location to meet with Keeshae. Keeshae's family continued to post flyers and hold rallies for her, and a few of these were actually close to the house that she was last known to have been at. And they were really hoping to keep public's eye. They wanted to be in this location, hoping maybe someone saw her leave, hoping maybe someone saw someone in the house acting strange, hoping that anyone would come forward. Keeshae's phone had been turned off the night she was last seen, the night of the 26th, in the Churchill area. And her bank accounts and social media haven't been touched since. So even if she did get a ride from someone out of Churchill, whenever she got in that car, either her phone died or something really, really bad happened. Then, in the midst of all this chaos and trying to understand what exactly happened the night that Keeshae was last seen, tragedy struck the Jacobs family again. It was just 4 months after Keeshae had disappeared, I think actually 3.5 to be exact. Davon was found murdered at a local motel at the age of 25. In a matter of 4 months, after 25 years of being a mother, Toni lost both of her children. In 3.5 months, both of them. And initially, everyone started to wonder if there was something going on, if there was some sort of connection here. It only took a single day for authorities to arrest a man named James Henshaw for the murder of Davon. Now, they got to him pretty quickly, which means there was some evidence pointing directly to him. Through the entire investigation and trial, they were trying to connect pieces to see if somehow Davon's murder and Keeshae's disappearance were connected. Because what are the chances, a brother and a sister both have some tragic occurrence happen within 3.5 months. And on top of that, 2 months after Davon got out of prison for a drug charge. Could there have been someone, owed money and that's why this happened? There's just so many different possibilities, but authorities did end up announcing that the two instances were not connected. The following year in November, authorities finally released that they fully believed foul play was involved in Keeshae's disappearance. But I know that a few different reporters have spoken to them since, and they've been very, very quiet about the case, and they have not directly stated they believe foul play is involved. I'm not really sure why, but I find that a little bit strange. And then things continued to be quiet. They kept searching for answers. Toni was absolutely relentless and still is absolutely relentless, but they just weren't really coming up with anything. And then about 1 year ago, it was announced that a male that's currently incarcerated for a crime against another woman apparently confessed that he was aware of where Keeshae was. Now, his name has not been released, and the multiple times that authorities went to go and speak to this man, all of a sudden he went from knowing where Keeshae was to completely just not being with it. I think there was a attempt at his life. The first time they went to question him, the next time they went to question him, he seemed completely delusional and out of it. I don't know if it's just kind of an act because he realizes maybe he lied. There's so many different things going on. While it is possible that he has information, this is also a pretty typical play by an inmate to get reduced sentencing. But authorities apparently are still looking into this. So there's something there that makes them believe it is a possibility. He knows something. And some people have actually speculated, and it was one of the first things that popped into my mind, that potentially this man and the man from the house are the same people. There are obvious theories in this case. Keeshae's brother and the family initially really looked towards the boyfriend because it's very suspicious when someone disappears, a female disappears, the day that they have a pretty bad argument with their boyfriend and a breakup happens. I guess Davon went over to the boyfriend's house. They knew each other and had known each other for years, and he showed up and was like, if I find out that you did something to my sister, we're going to have a huge problem. And the boyfriend apparently said, she was here. I'm not going to lie. We got into an argument that day. We broke up that day, but I would never touch her. He said that, he had known their family for years and years and years, that it would never cross his mind to ever harm Keeshae ever for anything. And he said that he would keep an eye out for information himself, and if he heard anything, he would tell the family. So, at this point, it seemed like he was being truthful. Doesn't mean he was, but there has so far been nothing to suggest that she was even with him that night. The only thing that I can potentially see is if she really did call someone to come and pick her up from this Church Hill location with this strange man. He said she didn't stay for long, called, and left with a ride. If DeMarcus wasn't the one to come and pick her up, which he's never said that he was, I don't know who else would have come to pick her up. So it makes me wonder if maybe she called her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, and asked him for a ride. Maybe he showed up and then maybe another argument ensued from there. The thing that bothers me the most about this is that I have so much speculation around this idea that she left, called for a ride, and left from the Churchill location. Authorities have her phone. They would know if she had sent a call out. So, I mean, I feel like that could really quiet down a lot of speculation around this particular area and narrow things down. But again, they're keeping things really, really tight to the vest. Now, I mainly have a huge issue and question a lot the friends and why the friends did not tell Tony they dropped her off in Churchill that night. The first time she went to talk to them, and I'm pretty sure she actually talked to them a few times and they lied every single time. At first, my first assumption was, maybe they knew she was going to be dropped off with this guy, and maybe this was something that Keeshae did not want her mom to know, and they thought they were protecting her. Maybe they didn't think that Keeshae was actually missing. She was just hanging out with this man. And then maybe once they realized she actually was missing, she was not coming home, and they realized something was wrong, maybe then they came forward and said, we lied, we thought we were protecting her. But that's not what they said when they came forward. They didn't come forward and say, we dropped her off with a guy, we thought she would have wanted us to hide this. No, they said that she was meeting with a mutual female friend. Why would that ever be a reason to hide something from Tony for days? It just really makes me feel like they know more. And again, I could be completely wrong, but according to Tony, all of Keeshae's friends have just vanished. They don't ask any questions anymore. I know there is apparently one that keeps up to date on things and makes sure things are progressing, but all of them vanished. And I honestly believe they know more information, because meeting with a mutual friend to me is just not a reason to hide something like that. It doesn't make any sense. And then, the one friend stating she never texted DeMarcus, there's just something sketchy happening with all of that. And I think answers lie with those people. Tony has been through so much. It seems like everyone has wanted to scam her. There's people that want to pretend they have Keeshae for money. They've sent her messages on Facebook demanding thousands and thousands of dollars. People have called claiming they are Keeshae. There are people that were photoshopping her face onto other people's bodies and posting it all over Facebook. And then to make things even more suspicious on top of that, people have gone to local businesses in Richmond, told business owners, oh, Keeshae's been found, you need to take those flyers down. I just feel like there's someone locally trying to throw people off, trying to shut people up, trying to confuse people, quiet down Keeshae's story. And that makes me so incredibly worried. It's not like it's that out of the norm for strangers to find a missing persons report, use that to scam someone. That's not that uncommon, but the rate at which she has been contacted and told all these things, and, people trying to convince her Keeshae, was abducted by Muslims, the most random things I've ever heard. It just seems like acts of desperation from someone, more so than random people seeing this as an opportunity. But despite that, Tony now works alongside the Richmond Police Department, and they put together an event in April for Missing Persons Day, and they put a lot of effort into this. They spend time trying to educate the public on how to keep themselves safe, how to help others that are dealing with these sorts of situations, and they really spend a lot of focus of the event on supporting local families going through the exact same things, because a lot of times these families feel so alone and they don't have anyone to talk to. No one can necessarily relate to their situation because a lot of people haven't obviously been through it. So they try to put on a really good event that's very, very educational and very, very supportive. Toni also decided to go to college to get an associate's degree in human services, and she's still constantly advocating for families with missing loved ones. She's now actually a certified abuse counselor as well. She just has this need to help people and protect people. After losing both of her kids, she said she was faced with this question of, well, what now? She was a single mom. Her entire life revolved around her children. She gives her numbers to all of the different families that have missing loved ones so that if they need someone to talk to, they have someone to talk to. She said that she's lucky. Not only is she lucky because the media and the communities half the time do not care about a person of color that goes missing. There's no coverage on them in the news, maybe locally, but then it never goes further than that. And typically the community makes their judgments and lays down their opinions and assumptions and moves on from it. And she says that she's so lucky because people are still talking about it. The whole community cares. So many people have reached out to help her, to support her. People in the grocery store will just come up and hug her and say they're praying for her and they care about her. The police department as well. They were really slow to get going at first, but then ever since then, they've been amazing. If she gets a lead at 2 a.m. and calls them at 2 a.m, they're there for her. They talk to her about it. They discuss their plans. They keep her in the loop as much as they can. Obviously, they have to keep some things tight to the vest. There are things that they can't tell her, but when they can let her know and update her and be there for her, they absolutely are. Because of all of this, it's really pushed Toni to want to start a nonprofit to provide support for families that have missing loved ones because she does not want anyone to feel alone like she did when this initially happened. She is just an absolutely outstanding woman, and I hope she gets answers because so far there seems to just be none. Instead, I just feel like I myself personally am left with so many questions, and I can only imagine how many questions she has and how many questions the police department has. Keeshae was very, very open to her mom about everything. She might not have brought her boyfriends to the house, every single one, but it's weird to me and it's weird to everyone that knows Keeshae that she would go to this man's house to potentially hang out with him, but no one knew who he was. None of her friends questioned anything, and then her friends lied about where they dropped her off and who she was going to be with. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they just assumed she was going to be with this female friend. Did she really call someone to come and pick her up? And if she did, who was it? I just find it hard to believe anyone actually came to pick her up because her phone stopped. Everything stopped. Everything went silent in Churchill, the last place she was known to be with a man that lied and then ran. There are some people that are worried that Keeshae was put into trafficking because if you haven't noticed by the pictures I've put up of her, she looks very, very young, very, very young. It looked like she was pretty much at the target age, of victims, people they're looking for to traffic. I also worry as well, again, that maybe it had something to do with, her brother being involved in dealing drugs. Again, like I said before, that's a lot of money involved. That's a lot of chains of people that could have potentially been mad or owed money. And this is, again, me just reaching and having a lot of speculation because I just don't have all of the answers. But it makes me worried. It's strange that 2 months after he gets out of prison, all of a sudden she goes missing in the most bizarre, random way. The girl who never goes out clubbing or really hangs out with strangers or any of that suddenly is with a stranger and disappears. Maybe his murder and her disappearance aren't technically connected, but if there was anything that potentially led back to his dealing of drugs before he went into prison, random people come out of the woodworks when money is owed, when things are going wrong. I have no idea what the motive was for the man that murdered him. I don't know if it was drug related. I have no idea. I do not know enough about the situation, but that's just something that definitely has been on my mind throughout this entire time. Keeshae was last known to be wearing black basketball shorts, pink and black Nikes, and a pink scarf. She has a tattoo of a leaf on her right calf. 2 paw print tattoos on her right thigh, a flower tattoo on her right shoulder, and a tattoo on, I think, her right hand. Family and friends of Keeshae decided to raise their own reward for any information that leads to an arrest. There's $3,000 that's being offered, and the local police department is also offering $1,000. If you have any information at all about Keeshae's disappearance, I have all the numbers that you can contact down below in the description box. Definitely give up information if you have it. This is one of those things where people talk, people say things, people see things that they might think are small, but they can piece a huge puzzle together with just that little bit of information. Toni has gone through so much, and she is fighting so hard to figure out what happened to Keeshae, and she says that she strongly believes Keeshae is alive and that Keeshae is being held against her will. She said that when Davon died, when he was murdered, she felt it. She knew something was wrong and she couldn't put her finger on it, and then she found out that he had been shot and killed. But she does not feel like Keeshae is gone, and I've said it once before and I'll say it again. As a mother, I will never, ever second guess another mother's intuition and instincts. So if you guys want, please definitely show Toni some support. Leave kind comments down below. Share Keeshae's missing persons poster. Share this story. Share this video. Whatever you can to keep her name out there and eventually, hopefully, bring someone forward. On that note, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and go. I want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Keeshae's story. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already so you can join the Hallan fam so we can hopefully bring them home together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.
She's missing from my arms. Keeshae, Mommy loves you so much. And I miss you so much. And I'm not giving up until you come home.
Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.